happy Friday. As this school year comes to a close, I know this has been another uh, interesting and challenging year with the launch of the new FAFSA. And kudos to all our districts for supporting our students with completing the FAFSA. And while numbers are still a little bit down, if not for your efforts, I think it could have been a lot worse. So really, thank you for everything you do and continue to do. Um, I was at the school counselors conference, the Connecticut School Counselors Association conference a few weeks ago, and I walked into Steve's session there on PACT, and there were about 10 people there, and I talked to Steve about, and he mentioned about some tweaks to the program that sounded fantastic. And I said there should be more people in this room. So I came back and I said, you know what? We've got to maybe we need this needs to be an annual session, Stephen, if you don't mind. But I almost feel like we need to keep this on our radar and do it at with a regularity here. So I came back and I
Absolutely.
talked to Renee and Stephen was most gracious to say, well, I'll be happy to do this. And Renee just does what she does, got it organized, got it out to all of you. And we had 170 people registered, and now we have more than 60 on sort of attending the session on a Friday at the end of the school year. I think that's a testament to how important this topic is, especially with all the challenges with FAFSA and making sure that our students are aware of all the possibilities for post-secondary education. College is not one thing. It's not just a four-year degree. It can be a two-year degree. It can be a certificate program. It can be a non-credit workforce-oriented certificate. But I know credit-based programs are what's of interest here with PACT. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen McDowell, who's the Associate Vice President for Financial Aid Services and Title IV Compliance at CT State, our nation's best community college system. And with that, Stephen, I'll turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Ajit. And can everybody see my screen? Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Perfect. So again, thank you and good late morning to you all on Friday. Again, thanks, Ajit and Renee, for pulling this together. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to everybody. I'm going to run through just a history of the program and land on where it is today. I do have some time for questions at the end, but you can certainly interject and stop along the way if you do have questions. But again, I will leave some time at the end. So as for me, my name is Steve McDowell. I am like Ajit said, the Associate Vice President for Financial Aid Services and Title IV Compliance with Connecticut State Community College. I've been in financial aid for about 18 years, and about 15 of those years have been with our community college system. A little bit about me, I am a certified financial aid administrator through the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. I am a certified strategic enrollment manager through the American Association of Collegiate Registrars and Admissions Officers. I am one of only 3 people in the nation who holds both of those certifications, so I think that's a pretty nice thing to have. A couple of years ago, I did write a book. It's called Basic Guide to Financial Aid. If you're interested in learning a little bit about what's behind the curtain in terms of aid administration and compliance, that would be a useful guide to you. I am a lifelong Connecticut resident, graduated from Xavier High School from the class of 2000 and off to Bentley University right outside of Boston and got my MBA from the University of Hartford. So about the history of this program, it was enacted in 2019 to take off in fall 2020 as a debt-free college program without a real true name to it. So we took the opportunity to name it the Pledge to Advance Connecticut program. And between fall 2020 and spring 2022, the criteria were that a student needed to be a first-time full-time student in fall 2020 with no prior college. Students had to be a Connecticut resident, graduate from a Connecticut high school or equivalent, complete a FAFSA annually, be continuously enrolled in a degree or certificate program for fall and spring semesters, and then meet our satisfactory academic progress policy. And that means the student needs to keep a certain GPA and PACE threshold each semester. As far as the awards, it is available for a 36-month period over 72 earned credits. And then on a per semester basis, the award amount would be the unpaid portion of tuition and fees after we award financial aid, or $250. So for example, if a student's charges for the semester were $2,500, they didn't get any financial aid grants, their free college award would be the value of the $2,500. But if they, were a Pell recipient, for example, and their Pell Grant award eclipsed what their tuition and fees would be, they would get a $250 award. It's called a minimum grant, but I tend to reframe it a little bit differently. It is a grant that's directly refunded to students. It is a basic needs grant. So that can be used for things like, food, housing, transportation, childcare, anything that would, qualify as an educationally related expense for a student to help them stay enrolled. From fall 2022 until spring 2024, the program was expanded to include part-time students. So those would be students who took 6 to 11 credits and also include full-time students. The duration was available for still 72 credits, but updated to 48 months instead of 36 months. And this was a real win for us because 2/3 of our students are part-time. So this really expanded the program for us after a couple of years. As far as the award amounts, that first line remained the same on a per semester basis. The award was equivalent to the unpaid portion of tuition and fees. The full-time minimum grant award was $250, but we were able to institute a part-time minimum award of $150. So that same qualification, if you had existing financial aid grants that eclipsed your tuition fees as a full-time or part-time student, you could still receive that minimum grant benefit. And then we get to fall 2024. So we had some great debate and commentary with the General Assembly and the Higher Education Committee this year, and we were able to make a few other tweaks to the program. And I will say that the Higher Education Committee in particular has been really wonderful in amending this program a few times now for the benefit of our students. And when I look to other free college programs, even just next door in Rhode Island, their program is the same exact program that was initiated several years ago. They haven't made any changes to it. It hasn't been updated. And I can't say that because our program has changed for the better several times over. So moving forward, a student is no longer required to have graduated from a Connecticut high school. They just needed to have graduated from high school or receive a GED or equivalent. We were able to have the continuous enrollment provision removed. And what that means is that previously a student who was eligible to participate in the program, if they attended in a fall semester and then, life happened, they took the spring semester off, or they took less than 6 credits, they would lose eligibility in the program permanently. We did have an appeal process to work through students. Certain things happened which we're absolutely willing to entertain. But this was something that was really detrimental to students, particularly our students, because they are working students the majority of the time and have children, and those things can't take precedent over college, unfortunately. The biggest update was the previous college attendance. So as the program is currently, a student had to be a first-time or continuing student at fall 2020 or forward, just with us. Moving forward, beginning in fall 2024, a student can have any prior college enrollment in fall 2020 or forward. So what does that mean? Is if you have a student who in fall 2021 went to Central Connecticut, they didn't like it, they went to George Washington University, they went to Gonzaga, anytime after fall 2020, and then they decided to come to us, they could still receive a free college award. But if you have a student, like myself, I graduated college in 2004. If I decided to come and receive free college, I couldn't because I already attended college before fall 2020. So this is going to open the gates to this program quite a bit, and we're actually quite proud of that because we do have a lot of students, especially when the program first rolled out, where they were students who, like in the example I gave, they attended Central, they went for a couple of weeks, didn't like it, and then wanted to come to us in the next semester, and we had to say no because they had prior college enrollment, and that was a really difficult conversation to have with more students than I actually care to count. The minimum award portion was doubled. So instead of a student receiving up to $250 for a minimum award, that jumped up to $500, and then for part-time students, that jumped up to $300. So again, I really harp on this because there are a lot of community college students who suffer from not having enough basic needs assistance. So this is, again, directly refundable to the students, used for, food, housing, anything that they're really insecure with to keep them in college. The biggest change that I think you're going to see is that we're no longer calling it the PACT program. So in statute, we now have to call this program, we have to issue awards as Mary Ann Handley Awards. So Mary Ann Handley, as you may know, was a Democratic prior co-chair of the Higher Education Committee for about 14 or 15 years. She was a history professor actually at Manchester Community College for about 30 years, and the General Assembly was kind enough to name this award after her moving forward. So, you will see our naming change a little bit. You're going to see a lot of the wording phrased around free college or tuition-free program. You're not going to see the phrase PACT anymore. We're going to have our own internal communications with students to make them aware, those who have been PACT recipients in the past, they now are going to receive something called a Marianne Hanley Award. Inherently, that's going to incite a lot of confusion and what is this and where did my free college go? But it is actually more than the same thing. The award is now available for just 72 credits. There is no time threshold on it anymore. And then the newest thing is that the program is now open to transitional students who don't have a high school diploma. So these would be students who are in an IEP transitional program, don't earn their high school diploma yet, because without a true high school diploma, you can't qualify as a Title IV recipient. You could do a FAFSA, but you can't get anything out of it because you don't have that diploma. So for students who are part of these transitional programs, if they do attend with us, if this isn't something that a state agency or some other agency picks up the cost for the student, our free college program will now pick up the cost for the student. The benefit here is these students can take as little as one course. They don't need to take a minimum of two, and they would be fully eligible for PACT. Again, this is just for tuition fees. This doesn't include any book and supply costs. So just to recap, because I kind of went through a history and a jumbling of what the different criteria were, the current program eligibility requirements for Marianne Hanley Awards, you need to be a full or part-time student, which means you need to take at least 6 credits. You can have any prior college in fall 2020 or forward. You must be a Connecticut resident. You must complete a FAFSA annually. You must meet our satisfactory academic progress policy, the transitional students we just talked about. And then as far as the awards, again, up to 72 earned credits without any time duration. Again, the unpaid portion of tuition fees without financial aid consideration per semester, or that minimum award of $500 or $300 for part-time students. Now, when I talk about financial aid awards in relation to tuition fees, the only awards that we consider are grant funds. So if you're a student who isn't eligible for a grant fund, you need to take a student loan. We're not going to hold that against you in terms of receiving this free college award. Same goes for work studies. So when we look at tuition fees, we're going to check to see if you have a Pell Grant, a Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, an institutional grant, and the line stops about there, because anything else is going to be in loans or private awards. Program awards, again, just to recap, if tuition fees are not covered by existing financial aid, which would be any of the grants that I just talked about, the Free College Fund will cover the balance due. And if tuition fees are covered by existing financial aid, even if it's covered by existing financial aid, again, the full-time award per semester is $500, the part-time award per semester is $300. On that first bullet, if you have a student, again, with the example of a $2,500 tuition fee charge, if they only have grant aid of $1,000, the free college program will pick up the other $1,500. So we can do partial awards. It's not an all or nothing kind of thing. Just some notes on the program. Over the last couple of years, these are a lot of the frequently asked questions, I could say, that we tend to get. There is no separate application for this. We get a lot of calls about where's the application for pre-college. I couldn't find the application. I do get some students and parents who said they did the free college application, which I'm honestly quite astounded at, because I'd still look to see where that might be. But there is no separate application for this program. The other thing is there is no program deadline. Now, when we started this program, we had gone out with priority deadlines to kind of facilitate a first come, first serve type of awarding structure. And that predominantly had to do with the amount of funding that we received. So in the very first year of the program, this was an unfunded mandate by the state. So we were required to start this program with no money allocated by the General Assembly. So we ended up using $6 million of our own funds and were able to award about 3,300 students with this program. And then subsequent to that, we did start to receive allocations from the state. But moving forward, we found that using those deadlines tend to confuse people. We get a lot of questions around July 15th that say, like, I'm just doing it today, what happens? And we will accept meeting any of their criteria up through what we call it our census date or freeze date, which is about 3 weeks into the start of the semester. So again, it is on a fund available basis. We will have about $30 million to give away this upcoming year. But again, with that, the population is significantly expanded. So for any communications that you do have with your students and families at this point, I would highly and strongly encourage them to do the FAFSA ASAP, and then get through the other, registration, and picking out a major types of things that they need to do. Students who are not eligible to do a FAFSA, they are eligible to do our ACTIS application, which is the one that's available for undocumented or DACA students. They are not able to participate in this program. It's a silver lining event, in my opinion, because honestly, for students who are eligible to do the ACTIS application, we will fund them with our institutional aid dollars. And not only that, but they will end up having money for books and supplies too, where our free college program doesn't allocate any money for books and supplies. So again, if you have students who aren't sure, they don't think they qualify for a FAFSA, you can contact our office and we can certainly help them through either application. And I'll have more details on that at the end. This program does not include funding for books and supplies, and this I tend to struggle with because one of the major wins that we had for the current year, which took effect last year, is Connecticut State Community College doesn't participate in the Roberta B. Willis Scholarship Program any longer. And what happened was they took the funds that were allocated to us in that program and transferred them over to our free college program. The hiccup comes where you could have a student who could have gotten that Willis Award, which would have covered, tuition fees and an allocation for books. We can't provide that book allocation anymore. So that's something that we'll continue to work with the legislature on moving forward, but that is something that folks should be aware of, that it only does cover tuition and fees. We will automatically apply awards to students' financial aid offers when they meet all the criteria. So again, once they do their FAFSA, once we review all their documentation, once they register, we can apply this award immediately. I mean, we have automated processes that roll these things daily. We don't wait for certain things. We don't wait for days in the week. It's done on a daily basis. The award is only available for fall and spring semesters. So we, in line with what federal policy dictates, we combine our winter kind of intersession with our spring enrollment. So if you have a student who takes winter courses, we can add that enrollment into the spring to be able to qualify a student for a free college there. But by statute, it's not available in any summer sessions. So just keep that in mind when you communicate with your students and families. The FAFSA is probably the biggest plea that I will make to you when, throughout the course of this presentation, is just to make sure that the FAFSA is completed annually. We do get a lot of confused students at times where, they did the FAFSA in the very first year, but not subsequent years, thinking it was just a one and done kind of thing. But the FAFSA is an annual application. Just some quick data points, and Ajit kind of alluded to this in the beginning, through May 24th, which is trailing a couple of weeks, Connecticut is down about 14.5% in terms of high school graduating senior completions of the FAFSA versus last year. Again, that's about 3,700 less FAFSAs than last year. A 2% gain than 2 weeks prior, where it was about 4,200 less. But again, we're making strides in terms of where Connecticut ranks with high school graduating senior completions of the FAFSA nationally. We are 6th behind, I think, Tennessee, Louisiana, Washington, D.C., Texas, and one other state that escapes me. But again, we're at, I think, 46-ish% of graduating high school seniors to complete the FAFSA. If you're interested in looking at the dashboard, the link is on there. And again, these slides will be shared with you after the fact. But NCAN has a great tracker that looks at particularly high school senior completions, not by state, just high school seniors. You can even break it down by, the town, by a specific school. So if you're a school that's wondering where your students might be, it could be a good tool for you to look at to gauge, where you may have some deficiencies or where it might not.
Hey, Stephen, if I might just interject on that point.
Sure.
I'm not sure actually, we have a partnership with OHE, Office of Higher Ed, and I know Ram's on the call, so I just shared the link with him. We actually get student level FAFSA data from OHE on fantastic. A daily basis, and we provide it to our high schools securely through our portal, updated every night.
Oh, that's even better.
Yeah, so our high school folks actually know which of our students have and have not completed the FAFSA. And I put a link in the chat to our FAFSA dashboard that we've been publishing for some years. It won't jive with NCAN because NCAN uses all kinds of estimates and stuff, and their numbers are actually sometimes quite off. We're down, like, I mean, based on last year, we think we're down about, or we know we're down about 7% from last year in terms of high school seniors. Still low. I mean, we're about 54% of our 12th graders currently have completed FAFSAs. But I know again, like our schools are trying, they're working hard. I think this message today is going to be a really nice, again, reminder to our students about this, about the possibility. So I just put the link in the chat, and we can talk offline. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Again, this is a great way and a great tool to promote college affordability. That is, a legit thing. You can graduate from CT State debt free. I mean, again, books and supplies you would have to pay for because it isn't covered under this program, but it's 2 years of tuition free, 2 years of fee free. If you're looking to move on to a 4-year after that, that's 2 years of free college. You've automatically cut the bill in half. The other benefit too is if you're a student who has a historical high EFC and they may not qualify for any grant aid but only loan aid, this is a good way for students in that category to preserve their federal loan eligibility when they move on to schools that cost a little bit more than us. We are a very affordable institution in comparison to 4 years. And again, if you're looking for more information, the link to our free college page is ctstate.edu/free-tuition. We update that daily. There's FAQs in there and some other pieces of information as well. And just in terms of financial aid information, our website is at the top there. We do host regular financial aid workshops. They are all published. They are at all campuses around the state. Students and families are free to register. They're free to make a one-on-one appointment. There's links to do that as well too on our website. For folks that are interested in running through our net price calculator, you can do that. And then there's some other resources too, and that last link, different, scholarship sources and different types of aid and just more overall financial aid information that you can certainly get your hands on there. And then last but not least, and I had said this to Ajit and I had said this to the folks that were at the school counselor conference, please contact us if you need help, if you're looking for us to do FAFSA sessions, just information sessions. I mean, we can do literally whatever you'd like. You can contact me directly. That's my direct phone number, my direct email address. And if you'd like to get in contact with the campuses that might be in your respective locales, that link there will take you to each of the 12 campuses, their contact information, phone numbers, email addresses, and you can reach out to them too. So that is our recap on our free college program. There's a lot to do with financial aid moving forward. I know the FAFSA has undergone some significant changes for this year. There's, unless you've been living under a rock, it's been in the news quite a bit. I will say, for having worked through the application myself, it is significantly easier. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of just easy steps to walk through. The way the tax information can come in now directly from the IRS, takes a lot of that piece out of it. The other thing I will say too is, from a CT State perspective, we're also down in FAFSA receipts. We're down about 25% from where we should be, and that's not a small number of FAFSAs. So anecdotally, we've heard that folks are waiting to do the FAFSA. They're waiting for the hiccups to run through, and I was fortunate enough. They say if you ever have issues with federal or state legislation, you should write to your elected officials. I did that. And I was able to get a meeting with James Quall, who is the Undersecretary of Higher Education, directly under Secretary Cardona. And, he, was able to give me a one-on-one meeting and work through kind of, where you are in terms of the FAFSA issues. And a lot of the issues that we have at CT State, honestly, has to do with the media. Because when you take a look at the news, we hear a lot about deadlines and when, your financial aid application is due. CT State, we're a community college. We don't have deadlines. We're an open access institution. You can complete your FAFSA today. You can complete it, December 1st. You can complete it August 25th. We're going to process it just the same. We do have funds that are on an as needed basis. A Pell Grant is an entitlement if you're a student who's eligible for a Pell Grant. I will say that tuition free and our institutional funds are limited, so I would always encourage folks to do it early and often. And back to the point, Mr. Qualls' point that he wanted to make was, if you have students and families who are waiting to do the application, they shouldn't be waiting anymore. There's no reason to not work through it at this point. And I just sat on a panel a couple of days ago with our state senator, Derek Slapp, who was a co-chair of the higher ed committee, who was a big proponent in moving some of these changes forward. And, he, as a parent of a high school senior, had talked about some of the challenges that he had to work through with his child. And as a joke, he equated it to be more difficult than getting Taylor Swift tickets 2 years ago. But everybody got a good laugh at that. But in a very funny sense, it was true. Going back a couple of months, it was very difficult. But at this stage, students can submit their FAFSA. They can submit corrections. We can receive them. We honestly started processing our applications this morning. So we had about 12,000 different tracking information questions that went out to students. We're going to start issuing awards next week. So for any student questions they may have, you can direct them to us at any time. But I do see there was a couple of chat questions that popped up.
Yeah, there was one question, Stephen, about, could you review that undocumented student piece again, the ACTIS? And
Sure.
I think if I heard you right, you said that you actually, for those who apply through the ACTIS and are eligible, like, you actually cover the cost for those students. I think that was news to me. So maybe you could just review that. That would be super helpful.
Absolutely. So, there are a set of students who are ineligible to do a FAFSA due to their citizenship status. So several years ago, the state provided for a separate application that the publics use. So the CSU schools in UConn has a different version of it. But we call it our 8 application for Connecticut undocumented students. And it's a paper application, unfortunately. It's available on our website. It's available at the ct.edu website for CSCU. But what happens is it's an application that mirrors the FAFSA. We ask all the same questions. It's just not online. We'll make a determination of a student's need the same way that we would for any other student who can complete a FAFSA. The only difference is we can't award them any federal student aid. We can't award them a free tuition program award, but we can award them our institutional aid dollars. So that's a grant fund that can be applied to tuition, fees, and the cost of books and supplies. So, versus a student who, could only receive a free college award that would just cover their tuition and fees, a student who would be eligible to receive an undocumented award, they could get their books and supplies covered too. So, they would have that extra added benefit. And honestly, that goes to other students who can complete the FAFSA too, because those funds can be applied to tuition and fees also, to books and supplies also, excuse me.
I think that's a really, really important point that we need to make sure folks know, because I personally hadn't clued into that. I would always point people to the ACTIS, but didn't know that there was actually this whole thing behind it. So that's super helpful to know.
Yeah, it is too. And just for, numbers sense, we only have about 400 students who complete that application. And I know there's more than 400 students out there. And, a lot of that has to do with some desire to not be found per se, which is, more than okay. But, just let those folks know that, they do have that option to receive financial aid. It's not federal financial aid. We don't release these applications to the government. It is held within the state.
Okay, that's very helpful to know. Paula had some nice words about your presentation, and I
appreciate that.
Echo her comments. Sarah has a question about, and I was thinking the same thing. The $300 to $500 goes only to those students if all their tuition is covered by other grants, right? So after they fill the FAFSA, correct, if they get Pell, institutional aid, whatever, like if all of that's covered, then, and no, I still keep saying PAP, no Marianne Hanley dollars are used for the program, then the student would be able to receive up to $500 now.
Yes, exactly. So, yep. So again, this is the last dollar program. So what we'll do is we'll assess the student's need. We'll run through, their federal eligibility, and if they're a student who can receive a full Pell Grant, that's clearly going to more than cover their tuition and fees. So if that student would get their tuition fees covered, they'd end up getting a credit balance refund off of their Pell Grant, and they'd get, depending whether they're full-time or part-time, a $300 or $500 additional award that would be refunded to students also. But if you have a student who, is fully covered by the free college program or partially covered, meaning, they have a partial Pell award and then a partial Marianne Hanley award, we could only award up to the cost of tuition fees. So only those students who are fully covered by existing grant aid would be eligible to receive that $300 or $500 minimum award grant.
And is that $300 or $500 that actually goes like it's a check directly to the student? Like,
Yeah,
how
we
does
would
that?
refund. We would refund it like we would any other credit balance refund. So, the logistics behind it is once funds are dispersed and applied to a student's account within 14 days, we're required to issue those refunds to students. So if you do have students with us, I would strongly encourage them to do it through direct deposit versus
Yeah.
getting a paper check. There is a thing that we have to work through where, believe it or not, students don't cash their refund checks, and we have to fine them to, give them the money they're entitled. If it's institutional money, it gets distributed to the state, but if it's federal dollars, we have to return it to the government, and that's money that we want to give students. Like it's not ours. We need to give it away to students. So, I would always encourage the direct deposit avenue if they do have the ability to use that.
Okay. And just to clarify too, that the Marian Handley Award, previously known as PAC, also referred to as free tuition, is available for credit-based programs, courses only, not
That's
for
correct.
non-credit certificate type programs, right? So just
Correct. Yep.
to sort of clarify that.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I should have mentioned that, and thanks for that point.
No,
Ajit. I appreciate it.
that's all right. I think
and-
because both options are available to students, so just want to be clear.
Yeah, and just to take that one step further, it is for degree and certificate programs. So if you have a student who's maybe not willing to pursue a degree at this point, they're only enrolled in a certificate, that's more of a specialty, we can use our free tuition award in that program too.
Okay. And I know there are several manufacturing, healthcare, IT type certificate programs, but that are credit based that exist in the community college system.
Yes, we have pushing about 100 at this point.
Okay. And the website is fantastic. I've said this to Karen Heineck too, that I think the website is much easier to get to. Deborah asked a question, and I'm not sure if it's, and maybe Deborah, if you want to, and Renee, maybe we can unmute Deborah if you want to get off mute. But she asked, is there any support for students who are in non-certificate programs, such as cosmetology, or I think that last word should be esthetician, like a skincare type program? Are those not certificate programs? Are they like the non-credit based programs?
Yeah, those I know as Nuntech has, at least the cosmetology one, if I'm not mistaken. But those are more the non-credit workforcey kind of programs that aren't covered at this point. If they do end up ever evolving into credit-based certificates, they would be included. Or if the state happens to make a change to have this program be inclusive for non-credit or workforce programs, they could be included. But at this point, they're not.
Okay, and I think Deborah means non-credit, maybe not non-certificate. Maybe that's maybe the terminology.
Yeah, I think so.
Anyway, yeah. Okay. Amanda has a question about, is there ever a chance of this program being opened up eventually to students who attended college prior to 2020?
That is my long-term goal. I was fortunate enough to be able to give some public testimony alongside our chancellor at this past session. And it was almost funny because one of the legislators had thought that was the law and not that it had that hard stop at fall 2020 and forward. He was under the impression that it was everybody. So, one of the questions was, would there be any other items you would want to see moving forward? And that would be one, because we had a lot of questions and negative attitudes, and quite frankly, they're not wrong, for students who, they, instead of, they started in fall 2020, instead of starting in fall 2020, they started in spring 2020. They were one semester off, and because they started that one semester early, they lost eligibility in the program. And it's really tough to see students and families in that situation who, miss it by a semester, miss it by a year for whatever the circumstances. I certainly hope long term that becomes an eligibility component of the program. It would certainly open up the gates for spending the money quite a bit. So we would need a substantial appropriation from the state. Otherwise, we'd run into, the fund would run out very quickly. You'd have a lot of folks who wouldn't be able to access the program. But long term, I think that's an avenue that we would certainly like to pursue.
That's great. I just put in the chat something, Stephen, you may be also interested in, about the earnings of our high school graduates. We actually did a study through P20 Win. We tracked the earnings of our high school graduates, and I put a chart in there that shows the earnings of our graduates from 2011, so like 13 years ago, and we looked at their earnings up until 2022, showing that the blue line is those with a bachelor's or higher. The orange and the gray sort of lines are those with a certificate or an associate's degree. And then below that is those who have some college or no college. So the point being that a college credential matters, does lead to higher long-term earnings. So just put a chat on that as well.
And the other thing I'll say too,
yep.
I'm sorry, G. The other thing I'll say too
Yeah.
is we've done some data mining on students who have been free college recipients versus those who have not, and we have found, statistically that they persist and pursue better than students who don't receive the program. I mean, they're persisting. I think it was about 8% better semester to semester and about 12% better in terms of graduation. So, the program is still, I would call it in its infancy. It's about, 4 years oldish. But from the data that we do have, we are seeing that those students who do receive the award clearly are benefiting.
If you can share that study with us, we'd be happy to promote that if it's available.
Sure. Excellent.
That would be great. I don't see any other questions in the chat. I don't think I've skipped any. And again, nice words from several folks. I think we definitely hit a nerve here with this session, and the need is clearly there, and the recommendation to do it again in the fall.
Absolutely.
Here just came in from Paula. What are the academic requirements for continued support? Like the satisfactory.
Yeah, so satisfactory academic progress, or SAP for shorthand, is a federal requirement that we need to assess on students. It depends on the institution, the way they assess it. A school like UConn or a four-year will do it once per year for various reasons, but an institution like us, we do it each term or each payment period. So what a student needs to do is meet a certain PACE threshold, which means they are passing a certain number of classes at a few different tiers. And then the second is to maintain a certain GPA threshold. So by the time they hit 60 credits as an associate degree seeking student, they need to pass 2/3 of their courses with a 2.0. But we have it on a tiered approach. So, we've crafted it in such a way where students who have a really poor first semester aren't disadvantaged the rest of the way through. We've put in some academic supports for those students who, their life happened, they had a tough transition to college. For students who don't meet a 1.7 GPA and or passing 50% of their courses, we institute a mandatory advising session with some of our guided pathways advisors. So a student can't register for further courses until they meet with an advisor to talk about what might have happened. And it's honestly a little bit intrusive, but for a purpose. These are students who, perhaps wouldn't go and seek out any advising help on their own, but we've identified that they've had some academic difficulty. So we're going to do that outreach for them, help them pick out their classes, help them get on track to, so they don't go back and register for, another 12 credits when we know they can only handle 6.
I'm seeing a load of compliments, Stephen. I don't see any other questions.
I appreciate this. And I know Renee and Ajit will share the presentation and they'll share the recording. So, if you listen again and you have any questions that pop up, again, my email address and phone number is right at the end. You can certainly reach out to me at any time. Again, or if you'd like to reach out to the campuses, my staff, there's 53 of them. They're all willing to help you. They're happy to go out into your schools, into your communities, and help the students of Connecticut.
Great. Yes, it seems like the questions are pretty much done here, Stephen. I want to really express utmost gratitude for your flexibility and to jump on and do this session, and also for your clear, concise, no nonsense, factual, very, very understandable presentation. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it. And we will be in touch to make this at least an annual thing going forward.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Great. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Steve.